Hey Titans, I'm in my new home office with my new headset. Got both the cats here. Maybe they'll make an appearance. So what I thought I would do is go through the second part of the chapter, which is also in the slides, which are on your website. But if you have any questions, um, just jump in and I'll see if I can answer them for you. So the first part I wanted to talk about was religious experience. So sometimes belief in God rests on this idea that people have religious experiences. And I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I've heard people say this, that they believe in God because they themselves have had a direct experience with what they consider to be the divine. I'm going to shut that off. One of the people who was mentioned in the book is Saint Teresa of Avila, and she felt like she had a direct connection to God. And another person who's mentioned is William James. And in both cases, they talked about just having a sense that God was there in their presence. It wasn't necessarily a visual, they didn't hear a voice necessarily, but they just felt that God was there. And so that helped to support their belief in God. So the problem with this, there are a number of problems with this actually. One of them is that, let's see here. Is that a lot of other mental states are very similar to this idea of feeling like you're in the presence of God. So, uh, being on psychedelics could mimic that feeling, or having a manic episode. Or there was another Teresa, I think, who had maybe migraines, but she had the type of migraines where there's a halo around everything. I don't know if you ever had that experience. I have. It's the type of migraine where you see a halo around everything. So these experiences that people talk about could be explained by other causes. So that's one of the problems that some people have with religious experience. Um, uh, Arguments for the existence of God. Another problem is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of coherence in terms of people seeing or experiencing the same thing. So, if you came from an Eastern religious tradition, you might have a very different experience from a Western Christian. A Western Christian might have a very different religious experience to a Jewish person. So, because the beliefs in God differ so much, the experiences of God differ a lot, which sort of makes sense based on how you conceptualize the divine. It makes sense that that's the way that you would feel it is interacting with you. However, um, like with the snake example, everyone kind of knows what a snake is, even if it's like in the dark and you step on it with your bare feet. You know based on the way it behaves and the way it feels and the size of it and all that kind of stuff. You kind of know what a snake is, and other people can corroborate that. With religious experiences, that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like God reveals itself to people uh, as it sees fit. But I can't go to like my sister and say, that time when I experienced God, because she might not have any conception of what I'm talking about, and there's no way to sort of match up those ideas. So um, there's a difficulty there. I'm just following along with the book. Um, yeah, I kind of liked the way this section ended. I didn't have it in the slideshow, but I kind of like it anyway. Let's say you are having a religious experience, a divine experience. What's to say that it actually is God? Could it be a demon? Could it be a god, like maybe like a lesser god than the ultra god? So there's no way of really knowing, even if, let's say, religious experiences do come from outside of you. They're not like, a hallucination or a manic episode or something like that. They're actually something that is causing you to have this experience. Fair enough. But who's to say that's actually God, right? There's no way to actually prove that. So I thought that was kind of an interesting idea there. Okay, so then turning to James. Like I said, there's a really great, I think it's Wi-Fi video of Clifford and James. And Clifford said that it was actually immoral to believe in something if there's no evidence to believe in it, that it actually is an immoral thing to do. And in the video, there's the example of the person with the ramshackle boat, right? And they believe it's seaworthy and then actually drowns a bunch of people. So in that case, there was actually reason not to send that boat out on the water, but the person believed that it was okay. And that led to the death of a lot of people, which puts the onus on the person who ignored the evidence and went with this like belief idea. James, on the other hand, though, says that sometimes it is morally acceptable for us to take a leap of faith, even when there's no evidence that there's something that we should place our faith in. In other words, there's nothing that we can measure. We can't take the temperature of God. We can't, get out our measuring tape and measure God. There's no data, right, that helps us to understand God. But there may be certain instances where it makes sense for us to take a leap of faith. And he uses this criteria of a genuine option that is live, forced, and momentous. So it says a live option presents someone with alternatives that he believes could possibly be actualized. Forced option is one that is unavoidable because the two possibilities are mutually exclusive, and not deciding is the same as choosing one of the alternatives. And a momentous option is one that really matters because the stakes are really high. The decision is irreversible, or the choice offers a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. In those cases, he thinks that it's fair to take a leap of faith. And the other pragmatic example was Pascal. And Pascal has that table that I provided to you where it basically is saying that if God exists, but you don't believe in God, you're in trouble because when you die, you're going to hell. If God doesn't exist and you don't believe in God, you don't really get anything. There's no reward for you. Let's say you believe in God, but God doesn't exist. Well, you don't really lose anything. But let's say you believe in God and God does exist, then you get this huge reward because when you die, you go to heaven. So it makes sense to bet on God, right? I think that's what Louis Vaughn says, betting on God, right? Now, there are a couple problems with this. One of them is, can you actually make yourself believe when you don't believe? Even if Pascal is right and this calculus is right, is it actually possible to get yourself to believe something that you don't actually believe? Another problem might be the way he's setting up the problem is it's all, sort of like all or nothing, right? So if you believe in God, you go to heaven. If you don't believe in God, you go to hell, kind of thing. Well, is there any like degree of belief or degree of behavior? Or what if you say you believe, but you don't really believe? Maybe God wants to punish those people even worse than the people who don't believe. So it sort of sets up this very simplistic idea of God and only allows these different, very simple possibilities. So I thought that was kind of cool. Moving on to Eastern religions. Okay, like I did with the slides, I'm going to jump forward to Hinduism. Okay, so let me bring up that slideshow because I did it last night, but it's not foremost in my mind. But Hinduism is probably the world's oldest religion. Right now it has, I think they said 3 billion adherents. So lots and lots of people are Hindus. Hinduism is not one thing, it's a family of theories, just like Buddhism is. And there are lots of different versions. So you might be a polytheistic Hindu, you might be a monotheistic Hindu, you might believe that there are many gods, but one of them is the best, right? That's a henotheistic vision of God. Or you might believe that there is actually no God, but still adhere to the principles of Hinduism. Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot of vocabulary in terms of Hinduism. And one of the things that the book talked about was the Vedas. So the Vedas are these 4 books, and they all, they range from like songs of praise to how to perform certain rituals to how to live like alone in the forest, right? And so there are all these different instructional books about how to be a good Hindu. Yeah, and then the slideshow talked a lot about the caste system. And then, and karma, what happens if you go outside the caste system. And then, yeah, so there were a couple things that I didn't talk about. Okay. So like in Buddhism and Hinduism, there's this idea of reincarnation. This goes on and on and on endlessly. And the cycle of death and rebirth is called samsara. We want to break away from that because like Buddha says, life is suffering. So you don't want to sign up for more of that. So the goal is to break this cycle of death and rebirth. So one of the vocabulary words that I didn't talk about is Atman. Atman means self, but it also means soul. So you want your soul or yourself to be released from this cycle. What else? So Brahman, 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 and it's capitalized, is like the soul of the universe. So what we want is for our little human souls to be joined or reunited, maybe, with the soul of the universe. So that's the ultimate goal there. Mm-hmm. There was a little bit of talk of the Bhagavad Gita, which is a 700 verse poem, and it is pretty cool. There's a story about Arjuna, and Arjuna is a warrior. He's in the warrior caste, but he doesn't want to be a warrior anymore. And there's a conversation that he has with Arjuna, and Arjuna is like, you have to, right? Like, this is your deal, guy. Like, you are part of this caste, and so you have to basically do your duty. You can't just say, I'm not into it. There's a great crash course video on Hinduism. I don't know what it's not in the philosophy section, but it's in another section, like maybe world history or something like that, or world religions. But if you look around, I'm sure you can find it, even if you just put in crash course Hinduism, if you want to learn more about that. Okay, and then let's go back to back in the book, but um, Buddhism. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with the story of the Buddha. Buddha was a prince, and he was kept in a very sheltered environment by his father. And he was sort of shown that life is all puppies and rainbows because the father was trying to protect him from, seeing and experiencing suffering in the world. But one day, the Buddha went outside the castle gates and saw the way life is. So I'm not sure exactly the sequence of events, but he saw a sick person, um, a dying person, a dead person. So he understood that life isn't all puppies and unicorns and rainbows, that life ends. Life sometimes is very, very difficult and full of pain and suffering. And he left the castle and went to sit under a Bodhi tree and eventually attained enlightenment. Very short version of the Buddha story. So the idea here is that, well, one of the things I think that story shows is that it's important to see reality and not to, stick your fingers in your ears and go la 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 la, or just pretend some things don't exist or that some things don't hurt us or whatever it is. I think it's important, and part of what that story is saying is that you benefit a whole lot more if you confront reality and if you accept reality rather than trying to shut it down. And we do shut it down in all kinds of ways, with television, with substances, with food, with sex, with gaming. There are lots of ways that we can shut down our emotions when our emotions become too difficult to deal with. And so one of the things that Buddhism is all about is stopping that tendency to shut things down, which is very human. But Buddhism tells us that if you take a moment and you look at what's going on and you accept what's going on instead of trying to shut it out, then that's part of being on the path to enlightenment. You can't get there at all if all you do is get high and eat cupcakes all day. So in order to, break free of that cycle, what we're going to have to do is a lot of work, and but he lays it out for us what we have to do. So let's see what else we have in the slides here. Oh, part of what Louis Vaughan does is sort of demonstrate the character of the Buddha. The Buddha was not a god, and he wasn't, he was sort of similar to Christ, except that he wasn't ever considered to be like, the half divine or like, the offspring of God or anything like that. He was a dude, like he was just a human being. But what I mean, he was in that he was close to Christ is that even though he was, just a human being, he was able to attain enlightenment in his own lifetime. And so, but different from Christ, like I said, he didn't have that divine lineage. He was just a person. And what part of what Buddhism tells us is that anyone could be the Buddha. It's not like, not everyone can be Christ. We could try to be Christ-like, but there was only one guy. That's what the tradition says. But in Buddhism, anyone could be the Buddha. It doesn't have that divinity flavor on top of it. So part of what's interesting about Buddhism is there's no God. There's no godlike deity that people pray to. The whole idea there is that we're not going to get fixated on a book, or we're not going to get fixated on a person or a deity. What we're going to do, though, is to recognize that there's a lot of work to be done. And if we do the work, then we have the capacity to become the Buddha. So that's kind of cool. But like the book said, no mention of like the soul or like, is there life after death, or any of these big questions that we think about. The Buddha was like, I don't know, and I don't care. What I care about is understanding that life is suffering. That's the first noble truth. And what I care about is how to, break free of the suffering, which is a lifetime, full-time job. It's not going to happen overnight. Okay. Yep. So the Four Noble Truths, these are outlined on page 111. So life is suffering. Suffering is caused by cravings. Cravings are only banished when you get rid of the desire for something, which sounds really hard to me. Right? So just think of anything in your life that you've tried to give up, alcohol, cupcakes I mentioned before, right? Or you want to give up the feeling of thinking about, this person that you can't be with or whatever. Just think about a time in your life when you tried to not, have that constant obsessive thought of something. But he just says right here, to banish suffering, banish the desires, right? If you want to get over cigarette withdrawal, just don't crave cigarettes anymore. Like, okay, Buddha, but that's like really tough, right? Well, how are we going to do it? Fortunately, he gives us the Noble Eightfold Path. So it's kind of like a roadmap to enlightenment. So I gave you a picture of that. In the book, we go from page 115 to 116, and the Noble Eightfold Path is laid out there. Mostly it has to do with thoughts and actions, and then what we do in terms of our meditative practice. So in terms of the Noble Eightfold Path, there are things like make sure you have the right intentions before you take action. Make sure that you have good thoughts and you're not like wishing ill on people. Don't gossip, don't lie. Make sure that if you have employment, that it is helping the world instead of hurting the world, right? So you probably don't want to work in a tobacco factory, that kind of thing. So there's the Noble Eightfold Path. And then the last part has to do with being mindful and also having a meditative practice. And so, like I mentioned in the slides, if you don't have one, I'm not trying to turn everyone into a Buddhist, but I just think that there are a lot of benefits to following some of the tenets of Buddhism. One of them is to have a meditative practice. Could be 5 minutes a day, but it's a time when you aren't doing anything else. You take time away from your day to notice things like you are breathing, you are here in this moment. And so it may sound a little goofy if you've never done it before, but what it does is it helps over time to bring us back to the present moment, because we can suffer a lot if we're in the future or in the past, right? So there's nothing we can do about the past, but often we reflect on the past, we obsess about the past. Why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why did I let her go? Whatever it is, right? And there's like this obsessive trap that we can get into. Same thing with the future. What am I going to do when, it's November? What am I going to do when I graduate? So we get into these traps where we are stuck either time traveling into the future or into the past. But if we can learn how to stay in the present moment, then that can help us to be more clear-minded and not so distracted and not suffer so much potentially. Alrighty. I don't know if there's anything else I wanted to say about that yet. Okay, so let's go on to Taoism. So one of the coolest things I thought about this part was that Louis Vaughan was drawing a connection between the Eastern thought of Taoism and the Western thought of the pre-Socratics, or post-Socratics too. But because often we think of Eastern thought as being like so different than Western thought, but actually some of these ideas, you know, the different cultures had in common. So one of the things that he points out is that Heraclitus, who was a pre-Socratic, was before Socrates, had the same kind of idea of God that Lao Tzu does. Neither one of them called it God. They both, though, talked about this sort of primal force of the universe, this like grand intelligence that is sort of the basis for the universe. And Aristotle thought of God like that. And there are some Christians who think of God like that. And there are some Star Wars fans who think of God like that. So instead of thinking of God as a person, just think of, this is more the idea that God, if you want to call it that, right, is this force that it pervades the universe, that the universe depends on, all that kind of jazz. So I thought that was kind of cool. Nature is very important in Taoism. Taoism means the way, or the way of nature. And so there's a School of Life video that I think I gave you where there's a lot of emphasis placed on the leaves falling from the trees and the water flowing down the hill. And when you observe nature, you observe that there are these patterns that we just accept because they have this sort of elegant math to them, right? And if we can get in touch with some of that stuff, then we can understand a little more what it's like to live in the Tao, right? So often we think of ourselves as apart from nature or above nature, something like that. But if we can actually get into the rhythm of nature, that's a really nice way to understand more what Lao Tzu was talking about when he was talking about the Tao. So that video is pretty cool. And then I showed you a picture of a surfer. So when I think of the Tao and the concept of Wu Wei, which is literally like going with the flow, it doesn't mean that you just, you know, are completely passive and you just allow life to happen to you. What it means is you're sort of doing a dance almost with life, right? And you're not forcing things to happen. You're not fighting, you know, the way things are. You're accepting the way things are and you're going with them. And the best example I can think of is a surfer, because I've never surfed in my life. It looks like really hard. I think it is really hard, but once you have the skill, there's this capacity that surfers have to, you know, move into the wave or move away from this part of the wave, and they are sort of, you know, in effect doing a dance with the ocean, which is pretty incredible if you ask me, because the ocean is awesome and scary, but it doesn't have to be scary if you know what you're doing and you know how to, you know, work with the laws of the ocean. Anyway, so that's it, I think. Yeah, for the chapter, second part of the chapter on God and religion. So it's about a half hour. Cool. Not sure if there are any questions, but I don't think so. So what I'm going to do then is end the stream. So if you have questions after you have watched it, then just send me an email and we'll just take it from there. Okay? All right. Thanks, and I will talk to you later. Bye.